I shouldn't be alive. None of us should. While the orchestra played and people laughed in the first-class saloons, the ocean floor was waiting for us. My name is Thomas Whitmore. I was a third-class steward on the RMS Titanic, and this is the story of how I survived the night of April 14th, 1912, while 1,500 people didn't. That night I made 3 decisions. 2 saved me. 1 haunts me to this day. Because the Titanic didn't sink just because of an iceberg. It sank because of choices. Choices I watched people make. Choices I made myself. And if you had been there, you would have died. April 10th, 1912, Southampton, England. The morning smelled of coal smoke and salt water. Thousands of people crowded the dock. Families saying goodbye, porters hauling trunks, vendors shouting newspaper headlines, Titanic, the ship of dreams. I stood in line with a single canvas bag. Everything I owned fit inside. 2 shirts, 1 pair of trousers, a photograph of my mother, a Bible she gave me that I never read. I was 19 years old, poor, from a family of coal miners in Yorkshire. My father died in a mine collapse when I was 12, crushed under 2 tons of rock. They never found his whole body. This job was my escape. Third-class steward, £3 and 10 shillings a month. More money than I'd ever seen. The ship rose in front of me like a steel cliff. 269 meters from bow to stern. 4 massive smokestacks piercing the sky. The largest moving object ever made by human hands. People around me whispered in awe. A little girl pointed up and asked her mother if that was a building. The mother laughed and said, "No, darling, that's our ship." But as I walked up the gangway, my boots clanging on the metal, I saw something that made me pause. A group of stokers were coming down. 6 of them. Rough men with scarred hands and faces blackened by coal dust. They carried their bags like they were fleeing something. I stopped one of them. "Why are you leaving?" He was maybe 40, missing teeth, smelled of sweat and smoke. He looked at me with tired eyes. "There's a fire in boiler room 6. Been burning for 10 days since Belfast. They can't put it out. The whole bulkhead is glowing orange." I glanced back at the ship. It looked perfect. Pristine white paint. Gleaming brass railings. "If there's a fire, why are we sailing?" He spat on the ground. "Because the White Star Line isn't going to delay the maiden voyage for a little fire. They'll just keep men shoveling coal away from it. Hope it doesn't spread." He started to walk away, then turned back. "That fire? It's right where the hull is weakest. Right along the starboard side. If anything hits us there..." He didn't finish the sentence, just walked away into the crowd. That was the first decision. I should have followed that man, should have left the line, should have gone back to Yorkshire and the coal mines and my mother. But I didn't, because I looked at my canvas bag, thought about my mother back in Yorkshire, thought about the £3 waiting for me at the end of the voyage, and I went aboard, just like 2,224 other people. The crew quarters were in the bow, deep below the waterline. 23 stewards crammed into a room smaller than a third-class cabin. Bunk beds stacked 3 high. The air smelled like coffee and carbolic soap and unwashed men. My bunk was middle level. Above me, a Scottish man named Douglas who snored like a sawmill. Below me, James O'Connor, Irish, from Cork, 24 years old with red hair and a quick smile. "First voyage?" he asked as I stowed my bag. "Yes." "You'll do fine. Just remember, passengers think we're invisible. Use that." "What do you mean?" He grinned. "They'll say things in front of you they'd never say in front of each other. Secrets, lies, affairs. You'll see the whole circus." That first morning, I woke at 5, put on my white jacket and black trousers, reported to the third-class galley where the head steward, a mean bastard named Hutchinson, assigned me my section. Cabins E56 through E72. 16 cabins, 38 passengers, most of them immigrants heading to America. Irish, Italian, Swedish. People who sold everything they owned for a third-class ticket. My job was simple: clean the cabins, serve meals, carry luggage, be invisible. But during my breaks, I explored. And that's when I saw what the Titanic really was. It wasn't a ship. It was two worlds pretending to be one. Third class was functional. Narrow corridors, white painted steel walls, bunk beds, shared bathrooms. The dining room had long wooden tables where everyone sat together and ate stew and bread. But first class? First class was a palace. On the second day, I had to deliver extra blankets to a suite on B deck. The passenger, a woman in her 60s wearing a navy dress with pearls, opened the door herself. Her cabin was bigger than the house I grew up in. Wood paneling, a real bed with a brass frame, a private bathroom with hot running water, paintings on the walls. "First time aboard a liner, boy?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She looked at me with sharp eyes. "Enjoy it. The ocean is beautiful, but it's also honest. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not. Unlike people." I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. She tipped me a shilling, more than I made in a day. That afternoon, I walked through the first-class areas, saw the grand staircase with its carved oak and crystal chandelier, the smoking room with leather chairs and mahogany tables, the a la carte restaurant where meals cost more than my monthly wage. I watched millionaires, men who owned railroads and factories, smoke cigars and laugh while third-class children played with rag dolls in the corridors below. Two worlds, same ship. I didn't realize yet that when the ship went down, those worlds would matter. On the third night, James woke me up at 2 in the morning. "Come on, want to show you something." We snuck through the empty corridors. Crew weren't supposed to wander, but James knew every blind spot, every unlocked door. He led me to a maintenance passage on C deck, a narrow metal corridor that crew used to move between sections without being seen by passengers. "This leads straight up to the boat deck," he said. "No stairs, no crowds. If something ever goes wrong, this is the fastest way up." Why would something go wrong? He leaned against the wall, lit a cigarette even though it was forbidden below decks. "I've crossed the Atlantic 6 times, Tom. Every ship has a moment, a storm, an engine failure, something, and when it happens, people panic. Stairs get jammed, doors get blocked. But this ship is unsinkable." He laughed, not a happy laugh. "Every ship is unsinkable until it sinks. The Titanic is just steel and rivets, same as any other, and steel breaks." I thought he was being paranoid, but I memorized the route anyway. That maintenance passage saved my life. April 14th started like every other day. I woke at 5, served breakfast, cleaned cabins. An Italian woman in cabin E63 gave me a piece of hard candy and told me in broken English that I reminded her of her son. The sea was calm, perfectly flat, like glass. At noon, I was in the third-class dining room when I heard 2 officers talking in the corridor. "Another ice warning. That's the 6th one. Captain's not slowing down." "Of course not. White Star wants the record. Fast crossing means good publicity. Fast crossing into an ice field is suicide. Tell that to Ismay, Bruce Ismay, managing director of the White Star Line. He was aboard, in the finest suite, pushing the captain to maintain full speed, 22 knots, through waters that 6 ships had warned us were filled with ice. That afternoon, I saw something strange. I was walking past the radio room when I heard the operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, arguing. "Another ice message from the Californian. Should I take it to the bridge?" The captain told me he doesn't want to be bothered unless it's passenger messages. We're being paid to send telegrams for the rich folks, not play messenger. The Californian, a ship less than 20 miles away, trying to warn us, and we ignored them, because sending birthday greetings to New York was more important. At 6 in the evening, I served dinner in third class. Families crowded around the tables. Children laughed. An old Swedish man played a fiddle while people sang songs I didn't understand. I remember thinking, these people are happy. They had no idea they had 5 hours left to live. After dinner, I went back to the crew quarters. James was already in his bunk, reading a book, something about sailing ships. You ever think about what you do? I asked him. Do about what? If the ship sank. He looked at me over the top of his book. It won't. But if it did, he closed the book. I'd get to a boat, fast. I wouldn't wait. I wouldn't ask permission. I'd just get in and get away. That's selfish. That's survival. He went back to reading. I stared at the ceiling. 11 hours later, I would do exactly what he said, and he would die because he didn't. 11:40 at night, I was on G-deck, almost at the bottom of the ship, carrying clean pillows to restock the third-class cabins. The corridor was narrow. Pipes ran along the ceiling. Electric lights flickered every few seconds. The wiring on the Titanic was still buggy. That's when I felt it. Not a crash, not an impact, a vibration, like when you drag a stick along a picket fence. A rhythmic scraping that you feel more than hear. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. I stood perfectly still, waiting. The lights flickered again. Then I heard it, a sound from deep in the ship, a groan, like the whole vessel was sighing. And then pops, small metallic pops, like someone tapping a hammer on a pipe. Pop, 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 pop. The rivets. 3 million rivets held the Titanic together. Iron pins driven through steel plates, and they were failing. That was the second decision. I had two choices in that moment. Go down one more level, investigate, maybe wake James and the others, or go up, look for help, warn someone. I dropped the pillows and ran. Up. That choice saved me, because 5 minutes later, the lower compartments were completely flooded, and everyone who was down there was trapped, including James. I ran up the stairwell, G deck to E, E to D, D to C. My chest was burning. I couldn't breathe right. I burst onto A deck, first class promenade, and almost collided with a couple in evening clothes. The man was smoking a cigar. The woman wore a tiara, actual diamonds in her hair. They looked at me like I was an insect. Watch where you're going, the man said. I was gasping. We hit something. There's water coming in below. The woman laughed, actually laughed. Don't be ridiculous. This ship can't sink. But you saw ballast water being pumped. Now go back to whatever you're supposed to be doing. They walked away. Behind them, the orchestra was playing in the palm court. Ragtime, cheerful. People sat in wicker chairs sipping coffee and cognac, like nothing had happened, because to them, nothing had. I stood there breathing hard and realized something terrible. Nobody was going to believe me. I ran back down to the crew quarters, shook James awake. James, get up. We hit something. There's water below. He opened one eye. What? Ice or something. The cargo hold is flooding. He sat up, rubbed his face. You sure? I saw it. He looked at me for a long moment, then laid back down. It's a big ship, Tom. They've got pumps, watertight compartments. Go back to sleep. James, I've been through worse. Once on the Oceanic, we took on water in a storm. Pumps handled it fine. This thing has 16 watertight compartments. It'll be fine. He rolled over, face to the wall. I stood there in the dim light of the crew quarters. 23 men sleeping, snoring, peaceful. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I climbed back up to the open decks, and I waited. 12:05 in the morning, 25 minutes after impact. Captain Smith appeared on the boat deck. His face was gray. He walked to where the officers stood near the lifeboats and gave the order I'd been dreading. Uncover the boats, muster the crew. That's when I knew. The ship was dying. The crew sprang into action, pulling canvas covers off the lifeboats, unreeling ropes, swinging the davits out over the side. But the passengers? The passengers stood around confused. A man in a tuxedo asked an officer, "Is this a drill?" "No, sir. Precautionary measure. Please fetch your lifebelt and return to the deck." In the middle of the night? That's absurd. The officer's voice got harder. "Captain's orders, sir." The man huffed and walked away. Didn't get his lifebelt. Just went back inside where it was warm. He drowned 90 minutes later. 12:20 in the morning, the first lifeboat was ready to launch. Number 7, on the starboard side. Capacity 65 people. Officer Murdoch stood beside it, calling out, "Women and children! This boat is for women and children." A handful of first-class women approached. They looked at the boat hanging 20 meters above the black water and hesitated. "Is it safe?" one asked. "Perfectly safe, ma'am." "But the ship is fine. The lights are still on. It's a precaution. Please get in." She looked at her husband. He nodded. She climbed in, reluctantly. Then another woman, then 2 more. But that was it. 4 women in a boat meant for 65. Murdoch looked around desperately. "Anyone else? We have room." The crowd just stared, so he started letting men in, just to fill the boat. 28 people total. They lowered it away. I watched that boat disappear into the darkness with 37 empty seats, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This was going to be bad. 12:45 in the morning. The deck was getting crowded now, not with first class, with third class. They were finally coming up. Whole families, parents carrying sleeping children, old people struggling up the stairs. I saw a young woman, maybe 20, with a baby wrapped in a blanket. She was crying. "They locked the gates," she said to nobody. "They locked us down there and the water's coming, and they locked the gates." An officer pushed past her. "Women and children to the boats! Move!" But she didn't know where to go. The boat deck was a maze if you'd never been there before, and third class never had. I wanted to help her, but I didn't, because the ship was tilting now. Not much, maybe 5 degrees, but you could feel it. The bow was dipping, and the stern where I stood was rising. That's when I made my decision, the third decision, the one that haunts me. 1 o'clock in the morning. I stopped trying to help other people, and I started trying to save myself. I pushed through the crowd, ignored the people asking for directions, ignored the children crying. I used the service corridors, the maintenance passages James showed me, cut through the crew areas where no passengers could go, and I reached A deck just as they were loading boat 14. Officer Lowe was there, young, loud. "More people! We need more people!" The boat was maybe half full, mostly women, a few crew. It was already being lowered. I didn't think. I just ran and jumped, fell 3 meters, hit the wooden seat with my ribs, heard something crack. Pain shot through my chest like fire, but I was in. Someone yelled, "Who the hell is that?" Officer Lowe looked at me. "You crew?" I gasped. Couldn't breathe. "Steward, third class." He stared at me for a moment, then nodded. "Fine. Grab an oar." The boat lurched. We dropped. The pulley screamed, and we descended into the darkness. I looked up as we went down. The Titanic rose above me, every window blazing with light, the smokestacks towering, music still playing somewhere inside. It looked immortal. But I knew the truth. It had maybe an hour left, 1:30 in the morning. We were in the water now, rowing away from the ship. There were 40 of us in the boat. Capacity was 65. We had room, but Officer Lowe ordered us to keep rowing. Get clear of the ship. If it goes down, it'll create suction. Pull us under. So we rowed. Every pull on the oar sent fire through my broken ribs. But I pulled anyway, because looking back was to see hell. The Titanic's bow was underwater now, the foredeck gone, water climbing toward the bridge. But people were still on board, hundreds, maybe thousands. They crowded the stern, the back half of the ship that was still above water, climbing higher and higher as the bow pulled the ship down, and the music kept playing. I could hear it across the water. The orchestra, playing ragtime, playing waltzes, playing anything to keep people calm. I later learned they played until the very end. Every single one of them died. 2 o'clock in the morning, the bow was completely under. Water was flooding into the ship through every opening, every door, every window. The stern was rising, slowly at first, then faster. The deck tilted, 20 degrees, 30, 45, and people started sliding, falling. I heard the screams across the water, hundreds of people clinging to railings, to benches, to each other, and then losing their grip, tumbling down the sloping deck, hitting the structures, the ventilators, the davits where the lifeboats used to be. Some fell into the water, some hit the propellers. 3 massive bronze blades now 50 feet in the air. A woman in our boat started sobbing. "We have to go back. We have to help them." Officer Lowe gripped the tiller. "Not yet. If we go now, they'll swamp us trying to get in." We wait. Wait for what? He didn't answer. But I knew. We were waiting for them to die. 2:15 in the morning. The Titanic's lights flickered. The engineers had kept them running for over an hour, stayed at their posts below decks, in the flooding boiler rooms, keeping the generators going so people could see to escape. None of them survived. The lights flickered again, then went out. Total darkness. The only light was the moon, a half moon, and stars. More stars than I'd ever seen. And in that darkness, I heard the sound I still hear when I close my eyes. The ship breaking. Not an explosion, not a crash. A groan, a deep, tortured groan of steel being ripped apart. The Titanic snapped in half, right between the 3rd and 4th funnels. The bow, already underwater, tore away from the stern, and the stern rose, vertical, 10 stories of steel standing straight up in the water like a tower. For maybe 30 seconds, it just stood there, perfectly vertical, and then it slipped beneath the surface, fast. One moment it was there, the next, empty ocean, and then the screams began. "1,500 people were in the water. The temperature was -2 degrees Celsius, salt water, below freezing. At that temperature, you have maybe 15 minutes before hypothermia stops your heart. The screams weren't like anything I'd ever heard. Not terror, not panic, pain. The sound of 1,500 people experiencing the most intense pain of their lives, and then dying. It didn't sound human. It sounded like the ocean itself was screaming. In our boat, nobody spoke. The woman who'd been crying had stopped. We all just sat there, listening. Officer Lowe stared at the water. 1 minute passed, 5 minutes, 10. The screams were getting quieter, weaker. "We should go back," I said. Nobody responded. "We have room. We could save. If we go now, they'll flip the boat," a man said. His voice was shaking. "There's too many of them. They'll panic. They'll kill us all." Officer Lowe closed his eyes. "We wait." "For what?" For it to be safe. I understood what he meant. We were waiting for enough of them to die that the survivors wouldn't be a threat. So we sat there, in the darkness, listening to 1,500 people freeze to death. It took 40 minutes. 40 minutes for the screams to fade to silence. When there was finally nothing but the sound of water lapping against the boat, Officer Lowe picked up his oar. Now, we go now. We rowed back. The water was full of bodies, people floating face down in their lifebelts, arms spread, hair drifting. They looked peaceful, like they were sleeping, but their faces. We pulled them over to check. Some were already frozen solid, ice in their hair, their skin blue-white. We found 6 people still alive. 6 out of 1,500. One was a man clinging to an overturned collapsible boat. We pulled him in. He couldn't speak, just shook. Another was a woman floating on a door, barely conscious. We lifted her into the boat and wrapped her in coats. The others were scattered, holding onto debris, floating in their belts, waiting to be saved or die. We got all 6, but I kept thinking, if we'd come back sooner, if we'd come back right away, how many more? 50? 100? They died because we were afraid, and I was one of the people who waited. 4 o'clock in the morning, we saw lights on the horizon, a ship, the Carpathia. It had received our distress signal and steamed through the ice field at full speed. When they reached us, they lowered rope ladders and cargo nets. We climbed up one by one. My broken ribs screamed with every movement, but I climbed. When I reached the deck, a crewman wrapped a blanket around me and handed me hot coffee. I stood at the railing and looked back. The ocean was calm, perfectly flat, except for the wreckage. Deck chairs, life belts, pieces of wood, luggage, and bodies. Hundreds of them, floating in clusters. The Carpathia couldn't take them all. There were too many, so they left them there, in the water. 710 people were rescued out of 2,224. I was one of them. On the Carpathia, I searched for James, looked through every survivor, asked everyone I met. He wasn't there. He died in his bunk, probably never even woke up. The water came up through the crew quarters and he drowned in his sleep. That's what I tell myself anyway, because it's better than thinking he woke up, that he realized too late, that he tried to get out and couldn't find the way in the dark. I also looked for the Italian woman who gave me candy, the one who said I reminded her of her son. She wasn't there. The old Swedish man with the fiddle, not there. The woman with the baby who was crying because they'd locked the gates, not there. The couple in the evening clothes who called me an insect, not there. Out of all the people I'd seen on the ship, all the faces I'd served and cleaned for and walked past, almost all of them were gone. I carry them with me every day. James, who told me how to survive but didn't follow his own advice. The woman in fur who wouldn't ruin her dress getting into a lifeboat. The man who thought it was absurd to fetch a lifebelt. The families from third class who were locked below until it was too late. And the 1,500 people who screamed in the water while I sat in a boat with empty seats. The Titanic didn't sink because of an iceberg. Icebergs don't kill people. They're just ice. The Titanic sank because people believed it couldn't, because the captain chose speed over safety, because the crew didn't have enough boats and didn't fill the ones they had, because they locked the poor people below decks like cargo, because we were afraid to go back, because at every step people made choices, and those choices killed them. I survived because I made different choices. I listened when the stokers warned about the fire. I went up when I felt the impact. I jumped into a boat without asking permission. I used knowledge that other people didn't have, but I also made one other choice. I stopped helping. I saved myself. And I've spent every day since wondering if that makes me a survivor. or just a coward. That night, I learned something about the ocean. It doesn't care who you are, how much money you have, what class your ticket is. When the water comes, it takes everyone the same. The millionaires died next to the immigrants. The women in diamonds died next to the women in shawls. The ocean doesn't negotiate. It doesn't give second chances. And it doesn't forgive. I also learned something about people. When the impossible happens, most people can't accept it. They stand there in their nice clothes in their warm rooms with their lights still on, and they wait. They wait for someone to tell them it's okay. They wait for permission to be afraid. They wait for proof that the danger is real. And while they wait, they die. Because the truth is this: in an emergency, belief matters more than reality. The ship was sinking from the moment the iceberg hit. That was reality, but people didn't believe it. So they stayed and drowned. I believed it. So I ran. That's the only difference between me and James. Between me and those 1,500 people in the water. I believed the impossible could happen, and I didn't wait for permission to save myself. Sometimes in the years that followed, I think about those three decisions. The first, ignoring the stoker's warning and boarding, could have killed me, but it didn't. The second, going up instead of down when I felt the impact, saved my life, killed James. The third, jumping into the boat without waiting my turn, haunts me more than the other two combined, because when I jumped into that boat, I passed people by, pushed passengers aside, used my crew knowledge to cut the line, acted like my life was worth more than theirs. And maybe it was, because I'm here, and they're not. But carrying that truth is heavier than any luggage. I lived another 40 years after that night, moved to Liverpool, never worked on a ship again, got married, had 2 children, lived a life. But I never forgot the sound of the steel mountain breaking in half, the sky turning black at 11:40 at night, people running without knowing where to go, James telling me to go back to sleep, the elderly couple at Livia's house choosing to stay, the young mother crying about the locked gates, the 40 minutes of screams turning into silence, and the water, always the water, black, frozen, infinite, waiting to take us all. People always ask me, why did you survive? And I tell them the truth. I didn't survive because I was smarter, or stronger, or more deserving. I survived because when the steel mountain started to break, I ran, while others stayed debating, praying, waiting for it to pass. I ran, and I didn't stop running until I was on the other side of the ocean. The difference between life and death that night wasn't luck. It was how quickly you accepted that the impossible was happening. The people who survived were the ones who believed immediately, who dropped everything and fled. Those who died were the ones who waited, who thought it can't be that bad, who went back home to get belongings, who refused to believe their ship was dying until it was too late. The Titanic lies at the bottom of the Atlantic now, 3,800 meters down, in the darkness, in the cold, right where it fell. And sometimes I wonder if the people who died are still there, not their bodies. Those are long gone, but their last moments, their last thoughts. Are they still echoing in those corridors, in those flooded cabins? Can you still hear the mother singing to her child as the water rose? The engineer who stayed at his post until the lights went out? The orchestra playing one last song? I don't know, but I know this. I was there. I heard them die, and I'll carry that sound until the day I join them, because that's what survivors do. We carry the dead. We remember them. We tell their stories, so they're not forgotten. I was there, and now you were too. If you made it this far, leave in the comments. What would you have done differently if you were on the Titanic? And if you want to hear more stories from people who were there in history's worst moments, Subscribe to I Was There.